You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Cortex. Security teams face a barrage of more security tools create more complexity. More devices need protection. More specialized focus areas create more silos. The security landscape is changing fast. How can security operations transform to meet current threats? Cortex by Palo Alto Networks consolidates SecOps tools into an integrated platform and helps organizations stop threats at scale with AI, automation, and analytics. Learn more at paloaltonetworks.com/Cortex. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems, and protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
We originally published some research back around the May 2024 timeframe called Operation Crimson Palace about some China threat actor activity targeting a Southeast Asian government. But it turns out right after we published the research, the threat actor came back and resumed their activity with some new tools and tactics and even some new targets that were involved. And so this year, we just published a kind of a second part of that research, continuing on with what these China-based threat actors were up to and some of their tooling and approaches to compromising victims.
That's Chester Wisniewski, Global Field CTO from Sophos XOps team. We're discussing their work Crimson Palace Returns, new tools, tactics, and targets. Well, before we dig into this current round of research that you published, what background should our listeners have on Crimson Palace?
Well, in essence, we originally uncovered three different groups that appeared to be working in a coordinated fashion that we refer to as Group Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. And there was a high degree of coordination in their activities where we literally would see certain days of the week, Alpha would be in there, and then another day of the week, Charlie would be in there. Sometimes even within hours, one would leave and then the other would come in. So it was quite clear that they had distinct tactics and tools they were using, but we also, there was a high degree of coordination. So that kind of was where we had left off. And at the end of that research, it was obvious that the Group Charlie was seeking information relating to conflicts in the South China Sea. And that was kind of where we left at the end of the original research, was with one victim, but clearly a coordinated activity that appeared to originate in China.
And so you saw this resurgence of Cluster Charlie. This took place in August?
Yeah, that's right. We started seeing activity after a couple weeks return in August of 2023, and then we were able to observe their further activities all the way through the late spring and early summer of 2024.
And so what are you seeing currently in terms of who they're going after and how they're doing it?
Well, we've observed that there's at least 11 other organizations within the region that they've managed to gain access to. Now, not all of those are Sophos customers, so that means that we don't necessarily have an immediate ability to know how they were compromised or what they might be doing in those networks, but we can observe activity from those networks to known command and control or known malware payloads and things like that we are able to observe that they're likely breached by these same threat actors. We've also got a lot more experience observing their tooling and their ability to evolve and evade detection within the networks that we do have access to. And a lot of that originally, Cluster Bravo, we did not have a lot of information about what they were up to. And a lot of the new activity we observed appears that Cluster Bravo is compromising these other organizations in the region.
Yeah, one of the things that caught my eye in your research was this idea that they were sort of testing your capabilities, seeing to what degree could you and your Sophos colleagues track what they were doing.
Yeah, there's a couple levels of that were going on that I found interesting. I mean, one of them is, of course, we noticed them downloading trial versions of our software, but instead of testing it on the computers where we believe the perpetrators are located, they were actually intentionally using VPNs to obfuscate the location to appear to be in the United States or in Europe. Instead of in Southeast Asia. Fortunately, we were still able to quickly identify that it was the same threat actors trying to test their malware out against our code. And when we traced it back, noticed they were VPN endpoints in the US and Europe, so they were likely just using that for some obfuscation. More concerningly to me, though, is just the real, we talk about advanced persistent threats ever since Mandiant coined that term back with APT1, and just the level of persistence and the level of coordination, we got a really front row seat to observe it. As you say, they were kind of obviously trying to evade our threat hunters in our software. But more than that, we could see how quickly they were able to, they had some bespoke tooling for backdoors and command and control. We were actively defeating it. So, of course, they stopped temporarily, but they don't stop the attack, right? They just shifted immediately into using some open source tooling, some commonly available things that you can get on GitHub and other places to continue to attempt to maintain access within these environments. And while we were battling them and doing that, within 48 hours, they were back with brand new bespoke tooling that we had never seen before. So it almost looks to be like, there's probably a software development team backing this group. And when their tool is burned, they don't stop attacking. They start using some open source things to try to continue their mission, if you will. But in the background, another team is, on the fast track developing brand new bespoke tooling for them to use in hopes of evading us once again. And that all happened typically in a 24 or 48 hour window, right? So we're talking very fast, rapid action on behalf of the attackers.
Wow. Can we talk about some of the tools that they use in the research? You specifically mentioned something that you all named Tattletale. What does that do, and what are some of the other things that they have in their toolbox here?
Yeah, the Tattletale was a bespoke keylogger and information stealer that was used within these environments. We had not observed previously, and at least to date, we had not been able to find any other research on. So we did name it Tattletale. And I want to call out, because I know the kind of people that listen to your podcast, and this is one of the reasons we're happy to be a part of it, which is we really want this information to get out there and find out other networks that may have Tattletale on them, right? Like this is a good bespoke indicator of these threat actors. And so we're hoping other research teams can use some of the information that we've published in this research to help us paint a more complete picture, because we know we've only got access to a certain percentage of victims that we were able to gather this intelligence from. And it's very unlikely that they're not compromising non-Sophos customers in the region as well, right? So we really see this as a key part of the community coming together and hopefully sharing some more indicators where people can observe what we've shared.
What did you see in terms of command and control operations?
I think the most important piece, I mean, there's nothing particularly novel about it other than, again, the tooling moving from bespoke to open source and back to bespoke. But what made it difficult to track in many cases is that they were using other similar victim organizations in the region to relay the traffic through for both hosting some of the malware and for command and control. And that made it somewhat hard to spot, right? Because you didn't have something unusual sticking out in that those networks were communicating together legitimately in addition to the compromised C2 traffic and malware traffic, right? So it wasn't enough simply to look for IPs you weren't used to seeing communication with. You actually had to analyze what was in those packets because those organizations were already regularly communicating, for example, over HTTPS. And so it was very obfuscated within expected traffic, which made it more difficult than usual.
Hmm. You also mentioned that back in January of this year, you all observed them using what you describe as modified samples of real blinding EDR, which is a tool that is designed to circumvent EDR solutions. Is that right?
Yeah, this is a trend everywhere right now. Lots of EDR killing or EDR evading tooling out there. There's a mixture of things that either are abusing drivers that are signed by Microsoft by accident, where the criminals are, or I should, in this case, I guess if they're nation states, I don't know if we refer to them as criminals or threat actors, I guess is the correct term. But let's say the adversary, sometimes they're tricking Microsoft into signing drivers that then allow them to evade and unload EDR products. And I was just actually speaking with our researchers yesterday, and we're currently observing a shift away from that tactic and back to abusing legitimate drivers that have been signed by Microsoft that have a vulnerability that allows those to be utilized by these types of tools to, again, unload the existing EDR software, whether that's from us or our competitors or Microsoft or whomever. Unfortunately, all kernel drivers are equal when it comes to Windows, meaning any of them can be abused to unload the others. And so everyone is vulnerable to these tactics.
We'll be right back. Imagine this. Your primary identity provider goes down, whether it's a cloud outage, network issue, or even a cyber attack. Suddenly, your business grinds to a halt. But what if it didn't have to? Meet Identity Continuity from Strata, the game-changing solution that keeps your business running smoothly no matter what. Whether your cloud IDP crashes or your on-prem system faces a hiccup, Identity Continuity seamlessly shifts authentication to a secondary or even tertiary IDP, automatically and without disruption. Powered by the Mavericks Identity Orchestration Platform, Identity Continuity uses smart health checks to monitor your IDP's availability and instantly activates failover strategies tailored to your needs. When the coast is clear, it's a seamless switch back. No more downtime, no lost revenue, no frustrated customers. Just continuous, secure access to your critical applications every single time. Protect your business from the high costs of IDP outages. With Identity Continuity from Strata, downtime is a thing of the past. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to learn how Strata's Identity Continuity can provide seamless enhanced capabilities to your existing identity fabric and receive a free set of AirPods Pro. And now, a word from our sponsor. The Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute is currently seeking qualified applicants for its innovative Master of Science in Security Informatics degree program. Study alongside world-class interdisciplinary experts and gain unparalleled educational, research, and professional experience in information security and assurance. Interested U.S. citizens should consider the National Science Foundation's CyberCore Scholarship for Service program, which covers tuition, required fees, university-sponsored health insurance, and a $6,000 annual professional development allowance, as well as providing a $37,000 additional annual stipend. Learn more at cs.jhu.edu/MSSI. Yeah, as I read through the research, I mean, one of the things that really struck me was how, and you've pointed this out, that it seems like this threat actor has practically an unlimited bag of tricks that they will just keep going to the well and trying different things. And some of it's bespoke and some of it's open source. Is it safe to say that, for folks in your situation, it really does kind of keep you on your toes?
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the more advanced cases that we've dealt with within our MDR service, and obviously, our best people get fascinated by these kinds of threat hunts because you've got such a capable adversary that it really is mano a mano, right? Like it's a battle of wits sometimes to see who's going to be able to get the upper hand. And as you point out, they're very well resourced, and I don't think this is different than any other government. Let's be fair. U.S. Cyber Command has some of the smartest and brightest, hardest working people, and they get up in the morning and they've got a mission to accomplish. And we shouldn't think any different of these adversaries. They've been given a mission. They're not going to give up on their mission. They're trained to continue doing it until they achieve whatever their target may be. They work in highly talented teams of people who are working closely together to accomplish that mission. And I think that means on the defender side, well, one, I mean, the defense is never done, because if you're successful and hopefully continually defending your target, there's an unending wave of them coming back at you again. But more than that, I think it really demonstrates how much our community has to pull together and work together, both through information sharing across the private sector and the public sector, if we really want to have a chance at this. I mean, if these guys have Team Alpha out there gaining access and Team Charlie knowing what data needs to be stolen, and potentially whether it's Team Bravo or perhaps even Delta or Echo out there developing this bespoke software for them, if we want to have a chance at defending ourselves, we need to be sharing information and these tactics and working together as a team with equal cooperation and efficiency if we want to succeed.
You mentioned threat hunting, and it seems to me like this is a good example of the benefits and indeed the necessity of threat hunting when dealing with this kind of adversary.
Yeah. I mean, when you have this type of adversary, you always are going to not be able to rely on your tooling. You're going to be falling back on 24/7 active monitoring and threat hunting. And our team actually presented some of this research at Black Hat back in August, and that was one of the things that we talked about in the presentation, was sort of you know, we think they're going to come back tonight, and we've set the trap with some new telemetry gathering tools so we can observe them. And then you're sitting there and you're looking at the clock, and it's 2 a.m. local time. And you're like, damn it, I thought they were going to be here an hour ago. Every night they've been here, right after midnight my time, and they're still not here. And just as you're about to give up at 3 o'clock in the morning, boop, your alarm goes off, they're back, and there's, the adversary gets to know you and you get to know the adversary, right? There's a real human element to this, that it's not just bits and bytes and exploits and memory corruption vulnerabilities, right? Like, there's human beings and there's psychology involved, and the highs are very high when you're winning, and the lows are very low when you're defeated, right? And we have to remember that, how important that human element is.
We started off this conversation talking about how this adversary went quiet for a little while. And I'm curious, as a researcher, when that happens, to what degree in your mind are you thinking, okay, these folks have gone quiet, but is there still a corner of your brain that's saying maybe they haven't gone quiet, we just can't see them right now?
That's exactly where my brain goes. I'm
Is
like,
that right?
these,
Yeah.
I mean, in this case, I think they actually had gone quiet. We're not quite sure, perhaps to regroup and decide on some new approaches and tactics. But,
Yeah.
my mind is always look, if we're in security, we're naturally pessimists that anything can be safe or secured.
Right.
And if I'm not seeing it, maybe I'm just not looking in the right place, right? And in particular, when you're assuming that this, we don't know for sure that these Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, we don't know if they're directly people working for the Ministry of State Security in China, or if they're contractors, or if they're freelancers, or, we don't identify them ourselves. We were unable to definitively attribute them to their individual roles, but we do know that they're working in coordination and appear to be achieving goals on behalf of China one way or another. And once you know that that's the kind of adversary you're against, you talked about resources earlier. U.S. Cyber Command, estimates that the MSS alone probably has access to 100,000 people or more working on these types of things. So, it's a vast amount of resource that you're facing, which means you're expecting that they're never going to go away unless you've truly failed and they've gotten whatever they're after.
Right.
And when we're talking about intelligence information and espionage, arguably that even if it's stolen, there's always more and newer information that they're going to want to maintain access to continue to gather intelligence. So really, it's no different than any other spying game. It's just electronic, right? Spying's always going to happen, and we're always going to have to be vigilant.
So what are some of the lessons that organizations can learn from this particular campaign? If they're looking to strengthen their own defenses against cyber espionage, what are the take-homes here?
Well, I think I look at this at two levels. I look at this at the vendor level, and I look at this at the individual organization that may be compromised. At the vendor level, I think we need to continue increasing our information sharing and cooperation with one another, because all of us only have a sliver of the whole picture, and we need to make sure. In this case, we worked with a lot of other vendors. I know we had done some information sharing with Elastic. We had done some information sharing with Bitdefender on some of the malware. There were quite a few different security companies that we had found evidence that had published research that clearly some of it aligned with ours, right? And we made sure that those communication channels were open for us to communicate. That's one level I think the cooperation needs to be happening at. And then for the individual organizations, unless you have a very large, well-resourced SOC, if you detect this type of activity, you do need a third party to come in and help you. And obviously, we like it when people choose our service, but it doesn't matter whether it's us or our competitors. You really have to have a crack team of people that are used to dealing with this type of threat actor to be able to follow up on these 24-hour cycles of brand new bespoke tooling coming in and this type of thing. It's top level, grade A game, and you really need to have help with that. And more than that, also your government agencies in the region. So, most countries have some sort of a CERT, and that acronym has changed over the years in different countries to mean different things. But whatever country you're in, in the United States, of course, most of us work with CISA. But in Australia, there's OSCERT, and in different countries, they all have some sort of a CERT. I think you need to make sure you're engaging at that level immediately, because the states themselves are sharing these IOCs about their adversaries, and they're going to have more information on what to watch for and what types of behaviors. Because, after a while, you kind of get into, everybody builds habits, right? And these attackers have habits too. And if that information gets shared with you early, you can kind of guess their next move on the chessboard and perhaps be there waiting for them when they take their next move. But to get that information is an international effort of governments, the private security sector, and the victims themselves all coming together for this.
Well, and as you rightly point out, you never know what piece of the puzzle you might be.
Oh, but precisely, and even the biggest companies in our space, no one has a complete picture of the data, and our governments don't either, right? Like perhaps through signals intelligence, our intelligence agencies may know some information about, say, command and control that the private sector may not know, but ultimately only Sophos or SentinelOne or Microsoft is on the desktop gathering intelligence directly about the malware and the commands being run and typed into the PowerShell on the machine that's been compromised. And to paint the complete picture, we all have to work together as one team.
Our thanks to Chester Wisniewski from Sophos XOps for joining us. The research is titled Crimson Palace Returns: New Tools, Tactics, and Targets. We'll have a link in the show notes. And that's Research Saturday, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to cyberwire@n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karpf. Simone Petrella is our president. Peter Kilpie is our publisher. And I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time. Quick question. Do your end users always, and I mean always without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. And it's now available to companies with Okta and Microsoft Entra and in beta for Google Workspace customers. Check it out at 1password.com/cyberwire. That's 1password.com/cyberwire.